Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Tzeentch in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And one of the things Creative Assembly has stated very clearly in their thank you message for 2024 is that they are going to implement certain updates for Tzeentch, Grand Cafe, with a major update for Kislev. Now of course, people will say, well, Lizardmen need a rework, Norska needs a rework, etc, etc. But I think CA just wants to finish Shadows of Change before they move on. Because right now, Shadows of Change is just not a very appealing DLC to people from a lot of perspectives. It's probably one of the worst DLCs, or worst selling DLCs that they've had for the Total War Warhammer games in quite a while, for a number of reasons. So that is my perspective, why they're doing that, why they're updating these races, and why they're going to rebundle it and resell it with individual packs. So let me talk about what I think they should look to change for Tzeentch, some of the problems. First off, we can talk about the entire Changeling campaign. I would say it would be nice if the Changeling campaign actually got fixed, because beyond the fact that his campaign is incredibly easy, incredibly boring, grindy, etc., and you can make it less so if you maybe had more movement, maybe if units were available earlier, some kind of things. But one of the things that should be changed with the Changeling is actually fixing his schemes, because a lot of the schemes, a lot of the unique objectives that the Changeling has, in my experience, having played that campaign, do bug out. As for Kairos Fateweaver, well, he's probably the most pathetic Legendary Lord in terms of action effects in the game. He's a good Legendary Lord to use on his own, but in terms of the faction effects Kairos actually has, like Battle Reinforcement Time minus 50% and Hero Action Success Chance, that is pretty pathetic. So yeah, some kind of improvements would be needed there. And also this skill line over here that gives him access to different kinds of spells from Schools of Magic is just not an especially great skill line. By the way, this is a modded campaign because I want to see how Tzeentch felt even when I gave myself significant advantages. It's still pretty one-dimensional and boring in a lot of ways. So if you're playing a default Tzeentch campaign, it's kind of even worse. The reason it's worse is obviously it is worse because it's slower paced, but it's also the fact that you kind of reach a point in your campaign where you realize the best thing you can do is not take territory for yourself. It's rather to take territory, sell it to others, and get vassals. Why play a campaign when you can vassalize Warzag? Though I think one of the problems with a Kairos campaign is you have a really bad campaign starting situation. The Northern Castaways, they have a good amount of diversity at Legendary Lords. There's interesting things that happen. Just basically sharing this entire landmass, which takes many turns to go from one end of the Southern Castaways to the others, just sharing that with Oxyatl is not especially great. Another problem is how difficult it is to get out of the Southern Castaways. Even with the teleport stance, I'd say some of these elements should be, we should have more port elements, we should have easier access over here. Maybe just a redesign of terrain would really help this campaign out. Another problem is that even when you get out of this entire area, you end up in jungle, which is as fun as you might imagine. Both jungle warfare and the Southern Castaways are just not especially great. And Tzeentch does have access to the teleport stance. I understand that. I get that. It is a good amount of strength that you do have access to, and a good amount of variety that you can get from that, but kind of worth pointing out that using the teleport stance to get out of here to teleport to Teclis is a tricky proposition. There is basically only one point over here where you can do it. So that is a bit of a problem. You look at the Northern Castaways, right? You look at the situation, there's a lot of ports, a lot of locations you can embark an army, move it to another settlement, reach Norska, reach other regions. There's even a land route available, and yeah, the concentration of Legendary Lord factions is greater. That would be one of the things. But the real problem, I'd say, from a Tzeentch campaign, beyond Kairos' issues, terrain issues, is the way settlements work. So you can vassalize factions for diplomacy, and one of the reasons you want to do so is because the way your economy works. Don't judge it based on how much money I have here. Again, modded campaign, I was just interested in getting things high. But here's the thing. One of the things that makes a campaign fun is having unit diversity. Now, people would say, oh, it's too easy or anything like that. I think, like, a campaign that's great in Total War is where you do have a lot of university, but you actually have a challenge. Like, there's a reason why Malachite's campaign is really good, because you do have access to a lot of units fairly quickly. You start with the tier 2 settlement. You also have his Horde army. You get units for free, but you also have a significant level of challenges. That is what makes that campaign particularly fun. Sure, you can always just spam gyrocopters, and I think that's less viable now that they've nerfed gyrocopters in quite a few ways. But still, when you're playing a Tzeentch campaign, because of your lack of money and issues with replenishment, because yes, there are issues in replenishment, even though we got the replenishment hero, basically they changed this hero to have replenishment as opposed to what was it, training, because they added the exalted hero of Tzeentch. I'll get into that in just a moment, but here's the principal issue. The way the Tzeentch economy works is that your settlements, while they're relatively cheap, they just don't generate a good enough amount of money to maintain large armies over here. Especially when you have a wide area to cover, like the Southern Castways. Now, the way you make this economy work is you get various income modifiers. I swear, the Realms of Chaos team really loved their modifiers, as opposed to just raw money. So you have an income structure that gives you 200 with 15 growth. Maybe remove the growth, increase the income, maybe even increase the cost. I'd take increased cost if I could actually generate double the money. The modifier aspect comes from the fact that you have a unique Winds of Magic manipulation mechanic that generates money, grimoires, income from all buildings in a province. So it's based on the idea of modifying it. Have a lot of Winds of Magic, generate more money. The structure itself generates more money. So you can end up in a situation like this one where you're generating 4,600 from a single province. But you're having to build not just a lot of these income buildings, but also modifier buildings to those income buildings. So this takes the form in major settlements in the Forgotten Scriptum, which goes all the way to tier 4, so that's a bit annoying, for the same effect that in a minor settlement the warp plinth gives you at tier 3. But this also is modified by Winds of Magic, because by default it has 15% income from buildings, and then you get an additional 15%. This also stacks with each other, and then you have resource buildings, which are actually worth less than a warp length, because they only give you 15% as opposed to 30%. So that's how you generate money as Tzeentch. But what this means is, a lot of your building slots, especially in minor settlements, are going to be taken over by these structures. This kills a lot of unit variety. Because one of the things that makes Khorne campaign so good right now is that you pretty much can just recruit military, like, you pretty much can just build growth buildings, as well as, recruitment buildings. Maybe then come from sacking and looting settlements if you want to take advantage of that. And that means you can get access to a lot of unit recruitment, both demonic and mortal recruitment. Now, I'd say the whole split between demonic and mortal settlements didn't work out. But speaking about that specific subject, by the way, of split between mortal and demonic settlements, the demonic settlement is just flat out now worth it. It gives you less growth, far less growth than a mortal settlement. It also doesn't have control. So that is an issue. What, is CA contractually obliged to have this? To have the split from Games Workshop. And this brings me to unit recruitment. Basically, the entire building chain over here, the sliver of potential, is completely pointless, because you can recruit the Blue Horrors and Cast Furies from either Demonic Settlement or Mortal Settlement. Pink Horrors are not worth recruiting, and Exalted Pink Horrors of Tzeentch, they might be worth using, but the problem is cost. Not cost, sorry, time. Bloodletters suffer because they take 2 turns to recruit. in a Khorne campaign. Rather, Exalted Bloodletters. Exalted Pink Horrors have the same problem. And mind you, ignore the recruitment slots. My campaign, I gave myself extra recruitment slots over here. The only reason you'd get this building is to get a replenishment hero, but you can only get these as tier 3, and there's a replenishment issue in the sense that Tzeentch replenishment seems to act weird. Like over here I have a replenishment hero. He's maxed out the replenishment. I even have research that gives me an additional 5% research. So I'm looking at a fairly high level of replenishment, and my spawn of Tzeentch over here have not fully replenished. Whereas my entire army is up to full. There's some weird issue with replenishment. I think it comes down to the barrier, so I hope CA does look to fix that particular problem with regards to that. So this entire building chain, worthless, resource buildings, warp lengths, weave of time, that's what you get, right? And minor settlements. And you go with unit recruitment and major settlements. But the problem is, like, yes, Flamers and Screamers and Cockatrice is decent units, but you don't want to make an entire army of these guys. Partly, you won't be able to freaking afford it in a campaign. Like, quite seriously. You really won't be able to afford a lot of these things. So instead, the best thing you can do in a Tzeentch campaign, because of your early game financial issues and other problems, and limited building slots, is you go for the many eye tributes, and you spam Tangors and Forsaken of Tzeentch. These are powerful units. They'll do good in auto-resolve, but due to the replenishment issue, that does affect these units as well. And Forsaken of Tzeentch, again, good units, really effective, fairly cost-effective, even by default. And he has Forsaken to have Frenzy. But you kind of realize that this army, while very effective, it's like watching paint dry. One of the problems Slaanesh also has is that the best thing you can do is just go for Cast Warriors of Slaanesh. Basically, the big problem in a Tzeentch campaign, you want to go for Tangors, Forsaken, and then Cast Warriors of Tzeentch. And you look at Khorne. Khorne has a bunch of infantry options. Even Nurgle has a bunch of infantry options that do damage. So those battles can be entertaining. Here, it's like you're throwing an army that's very durable because of the barrier, replenishment barrier. You'll almost always win every battle you go into in a campaign, but you can auto-resolve those battles, not because the auto-resolve would not be in your favor, it would be, but because you're not going to be able to replenish effectively due to the replenishment issues Tzeentch has. So it ends up being a very boring campaign. I would say that in terms of unit recruitment, they just need to remove Cast Furies and Blue Horrors from this freaking barracks over here. Put both of those in just any kind of building. Don't do the demonic mortal settlement split. That didn't work for Khorne, I gotta tell you. It won't work for Tzeentch. Don't do that split. Put these units in a tier 1 or even tier 2 capital, really. And just like merge this building chain with perhaps, you know, the cult of change, right? That would be good. Remove the warp length, just increase the economy, the baseline economy, maybe even remove the Winds of Magic manipulation over there, or keep it, whatever. But I do feel like it's a case of like the people who design Realms of Chaos thinking like, oh, let's add a modifier, so that's how you get very strong over there. It doesn't really work out. And no, I don't think that just because it works out to vassals, that's great. The problem when you rely on vassals to have a good campaign is that it's pretty dull as well, because like, literally this campaign, you look at Warzag over here, yeah, you think this campaign has any kind of challenge left at this point? I just had to fight Teclis over here, and it's like, GG, well played. Hell, I even got the Skaven over here as vassal. Though you shouldn't vassalize minor factions, though in this case, like, yeah, I couldn't care less about the territory. Oh, don't get me started on the victory conditions, because like having to wipe out Festus is as fun. It is really, really, really fun for a victory condition. It feels like a grind, honestly. So you end up with a lack of diversity in roster because you can't even get many of these buildings because you can't afford having armies if you don't get a lot of these warp lengths and weave of times and resource buildings. And it's going for Forsaken and Sangors is just vastly superior. Yes, I know, Changebringers are good. Do you need Changebringers? Do you need Flamers? I can tell you in a Dwarf campaign, I do want to recruit Iron Drakes, because if I'm not going to recruit Iron Drakes, I'm going to suffer. In a Tzeentch campaign, I don't friggin' need anything other than Sangors and Forsaken for the entire campaign. And if one stack of Sangors and Forsaken isn't enough, then 2 stacks, 3 stacks. That is kind of the problem. You lack versatility in terms of the roster. Despite everything that they added in Shadows of Change, all the units they added, it kind of ends up feeling fluff. Yes, Changebringers are really fun units to use. Undeniably so. Part of the problem is also the higher tier of units. So yeah, it could use a Khorne style rework where we get a lot of units available up to tier 3 that you actually want to use, because like, you know, Warriors of Chaos with halberds, Warriors of Chaos with dual weapons, Chosen, Skull Reapers. Then shortly after, and also because Khorne can get to tier 4 much quicker than Tzeentch, and shortly thereafter you can get, you know, Chaos Knights with lances, Wrathmongers, you know, chosen with dual weapons. There's a lot of variety over there, and that's just Immortal units. And say what you will about Bloodletters, like compare Khorne's Bloodletters, the tier 1 freaking demon unit, to Blue Horrors. Jeez, Bloodletters are like, yeah, they're not efficient to use in a campaign, but I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it is ridiculous to just summon a unit of Bloodletters in the middle of an enemy range formation and just the Bloodletters gobble half the enemy army up on a big blob, and you just rush in there and obliterate everything. They can also sneak up on you. Fighting Khorne right now feels like a challenge. Fighting Tzeentch, it feels like bashing your head against a brick wall. You'll break through it, but it's still a brick wall. It's not in any interesting, nothing interesting. As for the magic, yeah, Gelt has really set the stage of what magic can be. Like, all of Kairos's gimmicky spells that he can get over here, just, as I said, just don't feel like worth pursuing at all, really. Just a point with regards to all of that. So, hero tiers, hero recruitment tiers, hero capacity tiers, unit recruitment tiers, economic rework, that would help Tzeentch a lot. And a fix to the replenishment issue. Also research. Much faster research rate over here in this campaign, but basically the thing you want to rush for is scatter loci because of local recruitment capacity, casualty replenishment. By the way, it says a lot about casualty replenishment that literally the first research that the Changeling gets is 10% faction-wide casualty replenishment, and even that's not enough. Even when you defeat Festus and 20% faction-wide replenishment, even then, that kind of feels weird. It takes up to 30% plus to feel good. To feel on par with other factions that would get that kind of benefit for just the, 15%, so to speak. The value you have to get up to 30% plus to get the same, to have an arm, to have replenishment feel like other factions, that's a problem. Then we have to talk about the changing of ways. A gimmick, in the sense that there's some powerful effects over here, but one, it's very, very costly. So you probably won't use it all that much because you don't get enough grimoires, especially in a portion of the campaign when it matters. Again, modded campaign certainly have done progress much faster than I otherwise would. And what's the point, really, of using it? Like, literally, you're much better off resetting your movement range over here, using open gates, and that's kind of it. And maybe if you can afford it, transferring a settlement to you. But it's just kind of not necessary whatsoever. And never mind that a lot of the changing of ways do actually require you to waste grimoires to unlock it and research, and takes a decent amount of time to actually research it in the first place. Never mind the fact that there's research that does require you to actually get buildings in the first place. Yeah, that is not especially great. And the teleport stance, it costs wins of magic, unless you get a lot of this research sorted out, which even here, it took a decent amount of time with really fast research. So just overhaul of research tree, overhaul of economic buildings, overhaul of recruitment buildings, hero capacity recruitment. That's what I would say CA needs to do over here in the Tzeentch campaign. And if they could bug fix a lot of the issues the Changeling has, that would also be pretty good. It's literally just bugs. Maybe if the schemes actually felt worthwhile, that would be also a bit different, but it just doesn't. Just feels like a very gimmicky one-off thing. Because here's the thing, if you're playing on legendary difficulty, and this is before they majorly buffed AI in the game, because they did, those schemes, like, you think, oh, there's some very significant effects that are going to happen. It's actually pretty meaningless, because a lot of those things just are going to end up falling flat, really. And unholy manifestations also aren't especially great as a mechanic. Though I think, and this isn't a case, like, so I think like an overhaul of Unholy Manifestation for Tzeentch would be very much in order, because like, oh, I can do one that gives me Grimoires but stops my army for 2 turns. As totally not worth it. And by the way, this is the upgraded version with the Great Game Tzeentch Ascendant. By the way, we could talk about the Great Game and how that feels like a gimmick, because it's like, it's not something you can control. It's randomized. Maybe some of your actions, like, at least that's how I feel. Maybe I'm wrong on that, maybe how strong certain factions, but I'm not sure really about that. It always feels like it's a very, very random effect with the Great Game. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know if I am wrong with regards to that. But yeah, just a lot of these things. I would say it's not quite as bad as Kislev is, because here's the thing. Just remove one building, merge the effect into another, double the income, triple it, whatever, move some units in a building. These things are simple enough to do. Let me be very clear. Oh, changing a couple of things in research. That, like, overhauling the research tree, I imagine that's harder, but that's not really the big priority as far as I see it, right? Reducing tiers of unit recruitment and hero capacity and all that, that's not hard. Like, I know, like, I've talked to modders, I know how hard certain things can be. Like, overhauling structures or changing effects on structure is very simple. I know people who have no modding experience that have been able to do this. So, I do hope, so I think that's a minimum with regards to the structures. I think that would help. I think, however, we do need to talk about, like, the Southern cast rates and how dull it is, victory conditions. And the problem is, like, Skulltaker, I think, is a perfect example of this. CA does need to address the jungle warfare aspect and just Lustria and the Southlands in general, because, like, you can't just put a Legendary Lord in a jungle and think that will work. It will not. Like, Skulltaker can either be a very dull campaign or can be a very OP campaign. There is no in between in that situation. Well, you got the Bloodthirster over here. Well, my campaign doesn't just affect me as the player, by the way. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Kostin signing out.